everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. This week's episode was inspired by last week's episode, and let me explain. Last week, I did a paranormal campfire chat with Josh. We went out camping up to Good Luck Lake in the Adirondacks, and we talked all things paranormal. We kind of got onto the Mandela effect and the trauma that people experience when seeing things like ghosts or UFOs or Bigfoot. And we had a Bigfoot report that we discussed there. Somebody had related this to Josh, somebody that he knows, and there was a Bigfoot sighting at Good Luck Lake. So it was part of the reason we went to Good Luck Lake. I mean, it was just a spot we've been wanting to camp at for a while as well. But once we heard this story, we were like, we kind of have to go. We kind of have to record an episode there and see what we find. So if you missed last week's episode, go back and check that out. Josh is on the show again. Josh Diaz, my buddy. We talk about, like I said, all sorts of things. We start off with Bigfoot, but we get into basic belief. We get into trauma. We get into the Mandela effect, all sorts of cool stuff. But it got me wondering while we were out there, because I've talked about this sort of focus bias before. If you have Bigfoot on the brain, everything's going to be about Bigfoot. If you're thinking about ghosts, every sound is going to be a ghost. So that got me thinking, because we're out there, whatever this was, a few weeks ago, camping and chopping wood and putting up tents. And we have Bigfoot on the brain because this report that we took happened there. There's a Bigfoot sighting there. And so we're looking for Bigfoot and we're talking Bigfoot. We're thinking Bigfoot, which is great. And I mean, anytime I'm out in the woods, I'm always kind of looking in the mud. I'm trying to do I see any prints? At night, you're trying to listen for things. We heard some owls. We heard some other stuff. So if you go back and watch the episode, we talk about that. Nothing paranormal, I don't think. But you do hear weird things in the woods. And I think when you're out there, if you're into the paranormal as a whole, if you're into all of this stuff, your first thoughts are going to go to Bigfoot. But we had both nights, the sky had cleared up. The first day we were there, it rained most of the day, but at night, sky kind of opened up and we could see the moon, we could see the stars. And the second night, it was very clear and not as many stars as we usually see, but it was basically because we had like a half moon. It wasn't a full moon, but it was a half moon. But even a half moon, it was so bright that it washed out a lot of stars, but we could still see more than I ever do here in the city. So it was awesome. But it got me thinking that, like, we're up here, we're thinking Bigfoot, we're talking Bigfoot, but just as creepy could be like a UFO encounter. If you're up there, and we were the only ones camping there. I mean, we had hikers and other people, a forest ranger come through during the day, but at night we were the only ones there. There was not another single campfire that we could see across the lake. We didn't hear anybody. I mean, it was dead quiet and a little spooky because you think camping, you're hearing crickets, you're hearing things scamper through the woods. We heard nothing. I think the second night at about 3 a.m., we heard an owl across the lake, which is eerie sounding, but it's just an owl. But it's very easy to be out there and just imagine a UFO coming down and you're just at this campfire, or you're in your tent, or you're down at the lake looking at the sky, because that's where, there's no trees and you can kind of get a really good look at the sky. So yeah, I wanted to do some UFO sightings in the Adirondacks this week, just because I focus a lot on Bigfoot sightings up there and with Whitehall and everything like that. You do have a lot of these Bigfoot sightings. It's a huge wilderness. There are a ton of Bigfoot sightings up there. Lots of people talk about them. It's well known, but I haven't really covered UFO sightings up there. I did an episode a few months back about UFO sightings in the Mohawk Valley, which is a little bit south of the Adirondacks, but close. And that was a really cool story, but it was a listener story that was, not in the Adirondacks. So this week I wanted to focus on UFO sightings near lakes in the Adirondacks. I couldn't find any near Good Luck Lake. I'm going to keep digging, but I found some near some other lakes, lakes that we have camped near or that we drove by, like Caroga Lake or Lake Pleasant. So we're going to cover that this week. So enough of me rambling. Let me get to some cool UFO stories in the Adirondacks. And I'm going to do two more at the end. One in St. Johnsville and one in Tribes Hill, where Josh and Scott live. So from their area, just to kind of pay tribute to those guys, because they've helped a lot with the show and they're my buds. And I found some UFO sightings from around there. So we'll talk about those as well. So let's get to it. Okay, so before we really get into it, I just want to show you guys this website. It's New Fork National UFO Reporting Center. I'll link to it in the description below. But this is a really cool site. And as you can see, I can pull out on the map here. And so if you want to find UFO sightings near you, just go to the map and you can really just zero in anywhere. And, you know, obviously most of them are from the United States. They have a lot from the UK here. India, Bangladesh. I mean, all over the world, there's sightings, but most of them come from the United States up into Canada. So that's what I did. I just kind of zoomed in on some areas that I wanted to focus on. So let us get to the first story. Okay, so this first story, like I said, these are all going to be centered around lakes, except the last two, because those are just for Josh and Scott. But these are all going to be focused around lakes in the Adirondacks. So this one is from 1999. Two observers, and this is near Raquette Lake, the Golden Beach campground. And let me just read the narrative here. So they saw lights on an object. A second object joined the first after the first had circled repeatedly for over 45 minutes, leading us to believe it was a militia. That got cut off. I think they mean like a military craft. I'm writing this after reading the other sighting from Raquette Lake. I am not sure of the exact date of my sighting, but it was about 22:30 on a summer evening, and it was very possibly 1999. So we've talked about this before. People sort of forget the exact dates or exact times. He's saying about 10:30 on a summer evening, probably around 1999. I didn't see the other report that he's mentioning here from Raquette Lake. I just saw the one, so that's why I'm only reading this one. So that may have gotten taken down. I'm not sure what went on there. But they continue. While standing on the beach, it was very dark, at Golden Beach Campground with my father, we were viewing shooting stars and had on a different visit witnessed a very bright flare or flash from a Iridium satellite, now defunct. We were able to see an airplane with lights making repeated large oblong circles over the mountains. The plane was south of the lake in the general direction of Sagamore or Cedar River Flow to Moose River Plains, and Josh and I have camped at Cedar River Flow. But probably was only a few miles from Raquette Lake. The activity made us very curious, and we watched very closely as the plane continued the loops. Finally, a similar plane entered from the east and closed the distance on the initial plane. The second plane was now trailing the first by a very short distance and was following an identical pattern. This remained the situation for quite a while, only now they flew off in the distance. Subsequent conversations and internet searches had led me to believe they were military planes that were practicing refueling maneuvers over the desolate and isolated Adirondack Park. An hour or so later, one of the planes flew extremely low over the main street of the campground, and it continued west over the lake as I stood in the street between campsite 13 and 18, and the plane did not appear again. So he's saying he thinks this is a plane, military. Don't know why it's classified as UFO sighting necessarily. But, you know, he thinks this was military. I'm going to say this is military. He's calling it a plane. And I think Josh and I even spoke about this last week, that sometimes people, and I'm not trying to turn this into a UFO because it does sound like an airplane, does sound like military. But sometimes people see weird things and they'll just say, oh, yeah, I saw this bear, you know, running on two legs for 50 yards, or I saw this weird plane and it was making weird movements, and they don't want to say UFO. They don't want to say Bigfoot, but when you read stories like this, you got to be very careful, because this one, he's calling it a plane. It's acting weird. It's doing these sort of circles and circling over the lake and the mountains, probably military maneuvers. But you know, I do like to point out things when they are easily debunked. And to me, this sounds like a plane, but it was over Raquette Lake, and it's listed here on the site. So yeah, just something to think about. That I wish there was more of a narrative here, because I do wonder why this guy reported it if he thought it was just a military plane. That makes me wonder. He's calling it a plane. He's saying he thinks it's military, but he still wanted to report it to a UFO database. So something makes me wonder if there was something more to this that this guy suspected, and maybe he spoke to someone at, you know, New Fork here, and divulge more information they just didn't put on the website, but just stuff to make you think. But this one, I'm going to say this is a plane. I'm just going to debunk that and say it's probably a plane. So let's move on to another story. All right, so story number two happened in 2005, and this is near the town of Atwell, New York, which is close to Good Luck Lake, not very far. But this happened over North Lake. So the narrative here is 5 friends camping see 4 UFOs in one evening and one the next night. So the narrative says 4 friends and I were camping at North Lake. We were doing some stargazing when from the southeast we saw a slow moving object that looked like a star that moved from southeast to northwest. We thought it may have been a satellite or a jet with no flashing lights like a spy plane, but then we saw another object on a different path going north to south. And to stop for a second, a lot of people will see things like this. I've seen things like this that you think it's a star at first. It looks just like a star, and then it'll start moving, clearly moving. And actually, Josh and Dustin and I, we had seen one up at Fawn Lake, a purple one, looked like a purple star, and then it changed to like a white color, and then it just zoomed off. So very, very strange when you see these things that you think is a star, but it clearly moves. So he continues. The object moved the same way, slowly but changing speed at times and almost in a straight line. The second object was viewed through binoculars and appeared to glow bright blue and had a slight cigar shape. Just when we were starting to think things were getting strange, 10 minutes later, we saw another craft flying in the same direction as the first craft. Again, it was blue, rounded cigar shape. I got into the middle of the clearing to get a good view of the sky at this point, just as the third craft floated out of view. I saw another craft flying very close. It appeared blue and sometimes had an orange gleam. It was moving across the sky like a helicopter, but made no noise at all. I yelled for my friends to take a look, and they got up and all saw the object. Several of them said it appeared to be spinning, and as we watched it move across the western sky, an airplane was flying from the opposite direction, and it looked like they would possibly run into each other. The pilot must have seen the object and climbed quickly as the object approached. So this is another thing. When you go up to the Adirondacks, even tiny, tiny little planes that are way, way up in the sky, you hear them. You hear the engine noise. Like I said, it gets very quiet there at night. So you can hear engine noise. And when these things move like a helicopter, so not like an airplane in a straight line, if these things are, twisting and turning and veering in different directions, you should hear something. You should hear some engine noise. Every camping trip Josh and I have taken, when there's a plane, even if it's far, far away or way up in the sky, you hear some engine noise, even during the day. It's not even just at night. Even during the day, you can hear engine noise. These things are weird. They're different colors, blue. Airplanes typically they have the white lights and they have the red and the green little navigation lights on the wings, but they're not going to present as blue or orange or whatever. So this is interesting. He continues, after that, things seemed to die down, and we all agreed we saw something that was out of the ordinary. Even my girlfriend, who has always been skeptical of UFOs, was convinced the fourth object we saw was something strange. The next night, we all looked in the sky at the same time as the night before, and sure enough, we saw an object flying high in the sky, this time from northwest to southeast. We saw it stop at the horizon and seemed to stop, but the object was actually getting closer. So sometimes when something's heading directly at you in the sky, it looks like it's not moving, but it'll get bigger. It stopped short of actually coming right back at us and floated southward across the east side of the lake. Once again, all of us saw the object up close. After the object disappeared, we saw 4 or more airplanes flying toward where the UFO was last seen. So they're discerning between airplanes and this UFO, which I'm not saying is extraterrestrial. It's just unidentified. It's flying and it's an object. So he finishes, I would really like to know if anyone else in the area saw this or if it can be explained naturally in any way. This is my second time ever witnessing a UFO. The first time was in April during the daytime in Utica. I'm very interested by them, and I'm going to get a camera to get some proof of my sightings. So here's someone who's looking for validation or an explanation. Has anybody else seen these? Do you know what they are? Is it military? Is it drones? This was in 2005. Drones really were not a big thing back then. You're not going to see them up in the Adirondacks. And again, drones make noise. They have little propellers. So you're going to hear something. They're not going to be silent. So this is very interesting to me. You have multiple witnesses. You have these craft. And he sort of says, floats out of view, floated southwards. It's not flying. It's not zooming. It's just kind of floating, just very weird. blue and orange. So anytime I hear about these like weird colors, that always gets me too. Like I said, what we saw was purple. Uh, Andrew Razowitz, who was on the show a few months ago, had a purple UFO over Coney Island. So what are these things that are showing different colors? They're not just the main white that most airplanes are going to have. Those are the brightest lights on an airplane are going to be white. They're not going to be blue. They're not going to be purple. They're not going to be orange. You're going to see white lights, and you may see the little tiny navigation lights. You're going to see the red and the green, but overall, it's going to present as a bright white light. So this is an interesting story to me. Very cool. Cigar-shaped, different colors, changing colors, floating in different directions. Not helicopters, not drones, not airplanes. So what was it? What do you guys think? All right, so the next story happened near Speculator. And this one, uh, he's saying this occurred in 2022 if you look up here, but in the narrative he says it was about 40 years ago, so probably sometime in the early 80s. This is around Speculator along Route 30. The shape was a circle. He says it landed, but let's see. He says, while I know this was about 40 years ago, I wish someone would find it. I was driving north on Route 30 coming home from work when this round object glowing orange, so again you're hearing this orange color, came from the western sky about 50 feet in front of my car. While I have a general memory of where, I didn't take the time to look for it. Now I'm too old to do it. If anyone is interested, I will assist searching for this. Over the years, I've been reading about space stuff, and some is quite valuable. So I don't know what he's looking to do to go back. He might want to just find the place where he saw this object. I don't think he's expecting to find the actual object still there. But he's saying it was round, it was glowing orange, and it was 50 feet in front of his car. So he doesn't specifically say so, but it says landed characteristics. It was landed. So I'm guessing this was either on the ground or just at eye level as he's driving in front of his car. But again, round and orange. We hear this a lot with these weird orbs. People will see these orbs, and they're usually described as like orange or amber in color and round, like not saucer shaped. We're hearing again orbs, these round objects. He doesn't say how big it was. So again, some of these stories just don't have a lot of detail. I wish there was some follow up. When I do Bigfoot reporting from the BFRO website, a lot of those stories will have like a follow up investigation. A researcher will reach out and get more details because sometimes the narratives here aren't very detailed, or there's missing information or information they forgot to include, or there's clarity needed. So I do wish there was some more of that on this database. I mean, some of these stories are really cool, but some of them are just so vague. And well, how big was this thing? Was this, again, the orb that some people see that's like the size of a grapefruit? Or was this a craft? Was this something that was a UFO, a craft that was in front of his car? Did it land? Was it landed? Was it just very low? Where did it go? Did it zoom off? Just very strange, and not a lot of information here, but near Speculator. So a very cool story, just not a lot of detail. But I haven't found a lot of stories near lakes in the Adirondacks, so I'm trying to pick and choose some here for you guys tonight. But usually when we go camping, it's near a lake, and we like seeing the sky. And only one time did we see that weird thing, like I said, that purple light. So nothing orange, but this guy saw an orange light. So let us move on to another story. All right, so this next story comes to us from Caroga Lake. And Josh and I pass Caroga Lake a lot on our trips, and we actually just passed by it on this last one, coming home and going in. And there's some Bigfoot sightings around Caroga Lake as well, but this was the only sighting I could find near Caroga Lake. This happened in 2021, and I will read the narrative here. Driving home with my son, and we began seeing flashing lights in the sky. I thought that maybe the flashing was caused by stars going in and out of the tree line at first. So I like when people don't immediately jump to UFO. Again, there are certain people who just every light in the sky is UFO until it's not. And then other people, it's not a UFO until it is. And UFO, I just mean unidentified. I don't mean alien spacecraft or anything from another dimension or whatever. But I like when people mention that I don't know what this was. At first, I thought it was this. So that's always very cool to me because it shows that they don't have UFOs on the brain. So to continue, when we reached a clearing, it was obvious these lights were unknown. There were two alternating blinking lights with a third blinking more infrequently. They were an amber color, like I said, orange or amber. So very interesting. You got to notice patterns here. That's what we always look for because we can't really replicate things, but we can start noticing patterns. They were an amber color and very eerie to see. It was extremely windy out, and these lights were not affected and also silent. So that's another thing to keep in mind because sometimes people see like the Chinese lanterns and they float and they're orange and they could be very creepy if you don't know what they are, if they're in the distance, but they kind of get carried by the wind and they move. They don't ever stay still, really. Um, so that's an interesting detail that it was very windy out, but the lights are not moving and they're silent. So you're not hearing any engine noise. I am 100% sure they were not planes, drones, helicopters, stars, sky lanterns. So again, I mentioned the lanterns because uh, me and my dad and my uncle, we had seen these lanterns. We were camping at Bantam Lake one time many years ago. And we're just sitting at the campfire, and all of a sudden, these like amber lights just start floating down, above another campsite, a couple of campsites down, and they're up in the sky, and it looked so spooky. We're just like, holy crap, what are those? And as they got a little closer, we could see the flames flickering, and they were just Chinese lanterns that somebody had sent out. So they can be very spooky looking, but they're quite terrestrial. Uh, but this person is sure they weren't that. They were UFOs. In the video, they look white, but were amber when seen with the naked eye. We chased them for about a mile before they floated out of sight. They were quite low in the sky, simply amazing. So must have taken some video. It's not here. And again, trying to take video at night, even on the best sort of like video cameras or cell phones, you're not going to get much detail. It's going to look washed out. I mean, I take pictures of like these beautiful sunsets sometimes, and they just kind of, they're not as nice as what you see with the naked eye. You're not getting those vibrant, deep colors. You have to like edit them to get, the more vibrant colors. So he's saying or she's saying that the video they took, the light wasn't as amber, but they were seeing amber. So three lights blinking. There's no mention of red. There's no mention of green. There's no mention of white. They were just amber. And they chased them for about a mile. And I don't think if these were lanterns or drones, you're going to chase them for a mile. Drones have a very limited range. The lanterns are not going to move that fast. Even if it's windy out, they're very small, so they're going to move, but they're not going to move super super fast. So this is a cool one. Again, you have two observers. Weird, this same recurring thing, this orange lights or amber lights, this orangish amber color, which you're not going to see on traditional aircraft. So who knows what this was? Okay, so our last story from a lake in the Adirondacks comes to us from Pecks Lake, which is also not terribly far from Good Luck Lake. So again, I kind of started at Good Luck Lake and just spiraled out and just looked at lakes that had UFO sightings. But pay attention to this one because there's another repeat here. So this happened in 2007. And the narrative says, on August 2nd, while camping at Pecks Lake, upstate New York, we saw a bright orange light in the sky coming from the east. So again, another orange light seemed to be coming straight at us and then turned and went directly north, stayed very bright orange and had no other lights. Again, another important thing. When a plane is coming at you, it's going to be like a very bright white. You're going to see those lights coming at you. You may see the navigation lights. Once it turns, it's going to dim. But they're saying when this turned, it stayed very bright. So it's almost like the whole thing was just illuminated. This was about 9:15 p.m. Watched it move slowly until out of sight. Speed and no blinking lights, along with the strange, sharp right turn, seemed to rule out conventional aircraft. Was in the middle of a lake and had an unobstructed view at the time. Clear sky as far as you could see. So that's another story about this amber orange object. It kind of makes this right turn. No other blinking lights. It's not a plane. They don't mention that there was no sound, but they don't mention that there was sound. They're saying there were 4 observers here. So again, you'd think somebody would say, no, that's a plane. That's this. Clear sky. They had an unobstructed view. Watched it move slowly. Again, it's not moving quickly, but no blinking lights and the right turn. Again, people know what airplanes are. You've seen airplanes in the sky. Even if at like first you're like, oh, what is that? Because it's at a weird angle or whatever, it'll eventually turn, or it eventually gets to a point in the sky where you can determine like, oh, that is a helicopter, or that's a plane, or that's a drone. So this is just weird. Again, another orange light. We hear a lot of orange lights up there. I don't know why orange. Again, we saw purple and then it turned to white. Don't know that they're alien aircraft. Don't know what they are. They're unidentified. They're flying. They're objects. They're UFOs. So interesting. I like these stories. I like when there's like this uh, consistency of the orange. There's always the orange, the amber, orange, amber, moving slowly, no sound, no other blinking lights. These are not conventional aircraft. So what are they? Who knows? But this is the last story for the lakes. But now we'll get into a St. Johnsville story and a Tribes Hill story, and we'll call it an episode because I've had a very busy week and have more stuff to get going and doing. And yeah, I just wanted to do this week just because I love the Adirondacks. You guys know that. Okay, so this one comes to us from St. Johnsville. So hi, Josh. And I picked this story because it sounds very similar to something I had seen, and I did an episode on it. Black Triangle UFO over Brooklyn, and I'll link to all these older episodes in the description below. But this was in St. Johnsville in 2008. Lights on the object. It was a big black triangle shaped craft. So this is another thing we hear a lot. And there was a whole slew of these sightings in the Hudson River Valley of New York in the early to mid 80s. There was just this whole flap. There was books written about it. I think it was called Night Siege. And yeah, just people seeing these like black boomerang or triangle shaped craft. So let me talk about this story. My wife and myself were on our way back home with two of our friends when my wife noticed a light off to the right of State Highway 331 in a field. It was besides an old silo when it went straight up in the air and started coming towards us. We were almost home, and this giant black triangle followed us. It hovered over the house about 30 feet above the roof. All four of us just stood there and looked at it. It made no sound, as you could hear the wind blowing through the trees and nothing else. It slowly floated toward a stand of pines behind the house. I wanted to follow it, but no one would let me. Probably a smart move. Witness indicates that the date of the sighting is approximate. Again, this is you going back to 2008. They might remember the month. They might remember the season. It was summer. They're saying July 12th of 2008. So probably early summer or midsummer. And this looks like it happened at about 8:45 at night. I'm sorry, no, about midnight, they're saying. I read the wrong thing there. That was when it was reported. But they're seeing it at about midnight. But again, you do hear a lot of these stories. People will say, like, even at night, you don't necessarily see the shape of the craft. You know, that you don't see the craft too well, but it'll block out the stars. So they can kind of see, oh, there's like this triangle shape because we can't see stars. And is that from just lights blocking out, like overpowering the stars so you're not seeing them, or is that a black craft? This is another one. I wish there was a follow-up because they're saying a giant black triangle. How big? How big is giant? Some people describe these things as like big as football fields, so like 100 yards long. But they're saying about 30 feet above the roof, and it made no sound. They could hear the wind, but you're not hearing, if something is that close, you're going to hear a rumble, you're going to hear the engines, you're going to hear something besides just the wind. And then it slowly floated, didn't zoom off. It slowly floated. And again, people using these same words, floated. A lot of the orange stuff, the orange amber lights, just weird. And yeah, the thing I had seen years ago, I mean, it was very distant, but it was clearly triangle shaped. It was black. It was not silver. It was just clearly black. But my sighting, I'm estimating what I saw was a few miles away, not 30 feet above where I was standing. That would have freaked me out a little bit more. But this is a cool story because, again, this is another thing people will talk about, these black triangles that are, and they tend to hover very low. When people see these black triangles, they're silent, they hover very low, and they have numerous lights on them. And the characteristics here says lights on the object, electrical or magnetic effects. Again, I wish there was a follow up here. I wish there was more detail. What are those electrical or magnetic effects? I don't know. But St. Johnsville, shout out to Josh. Okay, and our last story, Tribes Hill, New York. So shout out to Scott and Becky. Just saw them when I went up to go camping with Josh as well, and had a good time with them. Always have a great time seeing all these guys, Scott and Becky and Josh, and wanted to do one from Tribes Hill. And there's a reason I'm picking this one. This is a debunking one. I'm sorry, everybody, to end on a wah wah kind of note. But this person says it was cigar shaped. There were lights on the object. Massive object slowly flying with a stream of lights. And this is from October of 2020. He says, fishing at night and saw a huge line of lights in a massive straight line. Ship was bigger than anything I've seen before, maybe a quarter of a mile long. If it was closer to the surface of the earth, it was very massive, bigger than any plane on earth. I was not the only one to see it. Someone I don't even know saw it too, and someone who was with me. So I think everybody may know where we're going with this. This sounds like Starlink. And I know Scott and Becky have seen Starlink up outside their house at night. I know Rebecca has seen Starlink up in Pennsylvania. I was on the phone with her one night when she was there, and she's like, "Oh my god, well, like, what is that in the sky?" And like for a split second, she was just like, "What the hell is that?" And then it was like, "Oh, it's Starlink." You know, you can see the train of lights. And I checked because I just wanted to make sure, like, when did Starlink start? Because if it didn't start until 2022, then this is not Starlink. But it started in 2019. So the satellites were already up there. Not as many as there are now, but this is very possibly Starlink and most likely Starlink. Especially because there's a huge line of lights. You know, most people, when they see a craft, it's circular or it's triangular or it's just one light. Usually when there's multiple lights, it's in a shape. It's not this straight line. But Starlink is. So this to me says Starlink. So yeah, I just wanted again to do a debunking episode or debunking story just to sort of show, you know, so I've bookended this episode with stories that are probably very easily explained, and then in the middle you kind of have some stories that are far less explainable. So this one I'm going to say is Starlink. I don't think anybody would even argue with me on that. I have not seen Starlink yet. I wish I could because it sounds really cool. But I'm in the city and we don't see much of anything out here. We're lucky we get to see the moon these days and maybe 2 or 3 stars on a really clear, dark night. Yeah, Starlink. So yeah, that will end our episode. Okay, everybody. So let me know what you think of these UFO stories. Clearly, the first one and the last one very easily debunked as probably military planes for the first one, and the last one was Starlink. But the ones in between, I feel like there were some really impressive stories in there, and would love to hear you guys' thoughts on those stories. What do you guys think these people were seeing up in the Adirondacks? It's dark up there at night. I mean, it's probably one of the best places on the East Coast to go where there's the minimal light pollution. So when you see the sky at night, you're going to see stuff clearly. And yeah, check out last week's episode. Josh and I just talking around the campfire. It was a little bit different, a little bit of a different format. We've done it once before. I will link to that in the description below as well. We were at Burnt Rossman State Forest about 2 years ago. Yeah, give or take. Almost 2 years ago now. And we did a little campfire chat. And it's just a little peek into, you know, how conversations with camping go when Josh and I are there and we just have the campfire going at night and, you know, kind of stream of thought. And the night before was like kind of politics and religion and existentialism. And nobody wants to hear that from us, though, do you? So we saved the second night's chat for the paranormal stuff and the Bigfoot story. And yeah, we had really no plan aside from the Bigfoot story. And then we just said, oh, we'll just talk. And this gives people an idea of what it's like to camp with us without, you know, the cold or having to chop wood or having to sleep on the ground and worry about bears. So go back and check that episode out, everybody. It's a cool one. If you have a story you want to share, you know, it could be UFOs, could be ghosts, it could be Bigfoot, it could be just anything weird, anything strange or spooky or unexplained that you'd like to talk about or share with us here. Shoot me an email, jason@oddanduntold.com. Where's my finger? There it is. Stupid camera doesn't always pick it up. So yeah, and check out our merch store. We have merch on there, hoodies. I'm not wearing one tonight. I'm wearing my Mammoth March hoodie, but we have hoodies and t-shirts and blankets and all sorts of cool stuff, coffee mugs, and it really helps out the channel if you guys can do that. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, comment. It helps the algorithm. Um, and I just love interacting with you guys. You guys always give such great feedback. I love that we're getting like more and more regulars and people commenting aside from our usuals. Fly Spec Cafe in Charlotte, Jay. So yeah, just want to hear from you guys, and I love the dialogue, and I love just hearing your thoughts because sometimes you guys make me think of things that I didn't think about on the show, and I try to incorporate into that into other episodes in the future. So yeah, I'm getting all tongue tied here. I don't know why. Just tired. All right, everybody. So that's it for this week. Until next time, question everything, question these stories, even the ones that sound like legit UFOs. What could they have been? Could they have been drones? Could they have been mistaken identity? Could they have been military aircraft? Unknown phenomena that is quite natural that we just haven't discovered yet? Or are they, beings from another world who are visiting us and want to see people camping in the Adirondacks? Who knows? So yeah, just be cool, everybody. Be safe, and we will see you next week. Rock and roll.